And what happened? You were trying to go inside the Capitol?
I made like a foot inside, and they pushed me out, and they maced me.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
High-profile protesters now face multiple criminal charges, among them Jake Angeli of Arizona, accused of unauthorized entry of a restricted area. Adam Johnson of Florida is charged with theft of government property. And West Virginia State Representative Derek Evans, who filmed his protest, resigned Saturday after he was charged with violent entry and disorderly conduct.
Just the idea of these people turning up without masks, like no balaclavas, no attempt to hide their identity, and then being shocked that they're going to get arrested, and then put on no-fly lists and all this stuff. I mean, you could not make up the level of stupidity. I mean, to be smiling, waving to the camera as you're actively stealing stuff out of the Capitol building, like, what did you fucking expect?
Blackton guy.
He was just taking a stand.
They thought in that moment that they were going to have their shitty revolution, and they thought in that moment that Trump was behind them and all the rest of it, that they were going to do this thing, that they were all going to get pardoned, that it was all fine. And then he's done what anybody could have predicted he would, which is like, yeah, whatever. They're all now sort of like, why is he saying it's Antifa? He told us to go. They're all heartbroken because their great General Simo has fucking abandoned them.
Considering how tooled up Americans are, the amount of guns and ammo they've got, especially the right-wing folk, it's sort of amazing in a way that there's not been more terrorist incidents from that side.
Well, it proves to me something that I've long suspected, which is that the ones that make the most noise about all this shit are actual yellow-livered fucking little chicken shits at heart. They had their chance and they fucked it. There was two groups of people, to my mind, in that environment. There were the kind of selfie seditionists who were stealing lecterns, and then there were the people with the fucking tactical backpacks and the cable ties who were quite clearly in there to take hostages and potentially to murder people. And they missed by seconds. If you've seen the footage of the Capitol Police officer Eugene Goodman being chased up the stairs, the first time I saw that, my thought was that he was literally being pursued by a mob. Then I've seen it again with the context of what's around him, and actually he was on the radio to his backup. He was drawing them away, and he realised that they hadn't locked down the main chamber and that they were very close to the main chamber, and he literally gives the guy a shove in order to piss him off and engage him, to get him to chase him further, to lead him to where he knows his backup is going to be. There's no two ways about it. That guy's good training, quick thinking, keeping his head in that moment almost certainly stopped lawmakers being murdered, because the chamber hadn't been cleared or locked down at that point. If they'd gone the opposite direction, the guy had gone right instead of left, following him, they would have been into the chamber with lawmakers still there. There were lawmakers from the Republican side, from the Fruitbat wing, who had been giving tours to people, and the tours have all been banned. They shouldn't have had anybody in there, but it seems like it's some of the QAnon fucking Congress people were showing people around, showing them where offices were and things like that. There were people that had knowledge of the building. So I don't know how much this is being reported in the UK to the same extent, but it seems like it's going to turn out to be much, much worse behind the scenes than a lot of people are currently realising. And just how close they came is disturbing, quite frankly.
I remember watching that on Twitter and thinking that he had armed people coming towards him as he has a hand on his gun, and I think all it's going to take is one shot and this whole thing is going to be like a powder keg that's going to explode. And I had that strange thought in my head of, right, well, if this is happening at the Capitol, is this going to spread throughout the country? Is it going to be other Trump supporters see this on the TV and then they pick up their guns and they go to their local government buildings and it all goes haywire, which would have been horrific. But then you also think how utterly absurd it would all have looked, because they all look like complete freaks and weirdos. You know what I mean? So you would have this parade of clowns just going through America shooting things up, and you thought, what a horrific yet bizarre image that would have been in the end, you know?
There's also a lot of other things, like the delay in sending reinforcements the lack of adequate policing of the Capitol building on that day in the first place. I mean, I think there are amoeba on Mars that must by now have seen the photograph of the Capitol building policing for the Black Lives Matter protest versus the 39 Keystone cops plus Eugene Goodman that they had for that day. The cops letting people in, the cops telling them where Chuck Schumer's office is, one guy getting selfies with them. There is a lot of shit to be excavated with regards to what happened here. The biggest fucking defence force in the world, and then they got taken over by Duck Dynasty and a guy in a Chewbacca bikini. Something was fundamentally awry here. And as far as I can tell, I think Mitch McConnell has an oversight role in what policing levels are for the Capitol that falls under his remit. You don't need to go the full 9/11 mentalness of thinking like, oh, they're all in on it. No, it's the sort of soft prejudice of these are our people, so it will be fine. Whereas the Black Lives Matter protesters, well, they're scary and black and angry. It'll be fine because they're our people. But then when reinforcements were asked for from the National Guard, and it was something like 3 or 4 hours before they arrived, and it was sort of 2 or 3 hours before permission was given to send them, and the military, in response to being asked, couldn't get the go-ahead. When discussions were happening, a Washington Post has reported that Michael Flynn, who was the first national security advisor who got canned for having ties to Russia and taking money from Turkey while he was national security advisor, and who is now a full conspiracy theorist, nut job, retired general. His brother is still in the military. He was on the phone call when discussions were taking place about what they were going to do and whether they were going to send troops. The military lied about that on multiple occasions. As Washington Post says, there's no conspiracy theory stuff. They were asked on multiple occasions whether or not Michael Flynn's brother was in on that conversation, because he normally would be because of his role. And they denied, and then it turns out he was. So people are shitting themselves and covering their asses here because this is a colossal fuck up. And it seems like DC, because it's not a state, sending in the National Guard is something the president has to authorise, and it seems like he was watching it on TV and enjoying it and refused to send the National Guard. And that's essentially what happened. And I think they sent them in the end without the due authority, because the alternative was a siege. It's what they kind of call the soft 25th Amendment, which is that they overrode Trump's authority without actually calling in the 25th Amendment. They did what they needed to do, even though they didn't have authority to do it. And that's even more worrying.
Absolutely. The investigation of the police really across America that's going to have to occur, I think, on the back of this now. I mean, it's pretty fucking evident, isn't it, that the far right, the alt-right, have absolutely gotten into police forces across the states, and how that country moves forward with that. I think that's going to be a real test of the Biden administration moving forward. To me, I think the public absolutely will be looking at that as a top priority now, to flush these people out. So I think that's going to be quite a telling thing about how they handle that moving forward, and if we're going to move in a better direction or the status quo is here forever.
I think that there will be an appetite to do it now, and there'll be a political opportunity to do it, because everybody's seen those pictures, and it's very difficult for anybody to pretend anymore that it's not a threat, because we've seen what it is. We've seen what they were prepared to do. And I'll be honest with you, I genuinely don't think Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are in any way tempted to go all kumbaya about any of this. I mean, Nancy Pelosi in particular, I think if she could have 10 minutes in a room with those guys by herself, they'd all be fucking dead. I think we're going to be okay. I think they're going to go after it. And of course, they can work out who they all are, because all of these morons left all their details on Parler.
The other thing about the morons and the bizarreness of their behaviour is that on the day, a lot of these morons were actually beating up the cops. We also had Onion Girl, who was pretending that she'd been assaulted and pepper sprayed, and of course it was just her rubbing an onion in her face. On the one hand, suddenly it's Blue Lives Matter, cops are fine, they're on our side, and then on the day, that's actually not really how it played out at all. So it's bizarre watching this group of Trump QAnon people trying to figure out their own narrative. There seems to be people amid them that are wanting to make the cops out to be these New World Order authoritarian types. There's another bunch that are there all armed up and thinking, fuck yeah, armed forces, policing, that's all good. So it's very confusing to try and figure out what the hell they're even trying to say. And of course now, after the inauguration, the whole QAnon thing's completely fallen on its arse as well, which has been hilarious to watch.
I don't think anyone would argue that they try to round up all these idiots who were like actually conducting violence is a good thing, but there has been some pushback against talk of, increasing surveillance and monitoring and going more hardcore on protests from even some Democrats who are saying if we go too far with this, we're actually just giving more tools to the police state so that, the next time a Republican regime comes along, they will use that against us. So there's kind of a line to be trod quite carefully with, how far do you take this and pushing back against these violent groups.
The proviso against that is that it would appear that right-wing lunatics can't do tech and that, no great amount of surveillance was required with regards to Parler because the setup of their website was such that every single entry was just numerically one on a page number from the one previous, which enabled somebody to harvest almost the entire site. And it didn't strip out the geolocation data from uploads of photos and videos. So thanks to their own idiocy, there's no real surveillance state required. All you have to do is access things that they themselves made publicly available.
Nevertheless, you can imagine certain people using this as an excuse to take things in a direction they probably wanted to go in anyway. But I think there's been enough pushback among other Democrats to say, round these people up, but that's as far as you need to go. Basically, this was just a failure of policing and failure of people to just do their basic job of organising people to be where they need to be. It's quite easy to get into the conspiracy theory stuff, which it may turn out to be true. From either side, it could be that Democrats were quite keen for this to go all horribly wrong and the protests to go badly, because it has played well into their hands. That's slightly believable. Or it could be the other case. The Republicans were more wanting to actually have some sort of a coup. I've heard folks saying all sorts of mad stuff, so I don't know what to believe at this stage. It'll all come out eventually. Whenever I hear conspiracy theories like this, I always just go back to the fact that people do just screw up, especially people who work in government. So that's always the most likely case in almost every conspiracy theory I've ever heard, is someone just arsing up their job, forgetting to do something, or just doing their job very badly.
This is my unifying view of the universe, is that all the things that you sort of think of, all the great conspiracy theories, actually what you're seeing is the cover-up of a cock-up.
I think that what you're saying there, Free, is very valid and important, and I've not heard many people saying that, the Democrats could use this as an excuse to do a more updated version of the Patriot Act to a certain extent. And as you're saying there, Tucker, we're not dealing with an IRA, Al-Qaeda type organisation here. These people are hopeless. They will just put themselves in the firing line to get arrested. Basically, we don't have to escalate things to that degree.
Yeah, it seems like ISIS have better coders.
When I first watched all this stuff happening, I was like, get your guns out, just shoot them all, get a machine gun out, just wipe them all out, these horrible people. But the more I watched, you hear the stories of the folk that get involved and this woman that gets shot dead and all that. You start to feel sorry for them and how they've just ruined their life over just this absolute garbage. And it's been fun in a way to watch all the QAnon folk crying that their stupid, mad theories have been proved to be complete garbage. And it's fun, but at the same time, there's people's lives have been ruined over this stuff. And it's not just a handful of people, like some mad cult. This is a huge swathe of people in America. Isn't bad.
See, I think that's a really interesting take, because you were saying that the instinct by the government would probably be clamp down on it, go full Patriot Act. Whereas what we're suggesting here is you might want to approach this in a more of a mental health angle on this, an education angle, and say that, in order to stop this shit happening, you need to take better care of your citizens, because they will just get sucked down these political conspiracy theory black holes, and the next thing you know, they're turning up to the Capitol building armed, looking to kill somebody. And I don't know if that's necessarily just a security threat in a toss them in jail way. That should be preventatives, in the same way a lot of mosques, for example, in the UK, are very vigilant about radicalisation and often will work with the security services to prevent that. And that has been very effective in Britain over the last how many years. And you're wondering, if do you approach it in a similar manner, where rather than just saying, yeah, fuck them, shoot them, put them in jail, do we help these people is the question now.
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to. I think you need to differentiate between knowing ringleaders and people who drank the Kool-Aid. There are the people who dispense the Kool-Aid, and there are the people who drink the Kool-Aid, and they're two very clearly different groups. I would really, really like to see Ted Cruz get expelled from the Senate for this. And there is a chance that he might, because apparently he is the least popular man in American politics amongst actual politicians. I think I once heard somebody say that if you shot Ted Cruz on C-SPAN on the floor of the Senate, you wouldn't be able to get a conviction because nobody would testify against you. He is loathed. He does things like schedule emails to go to people at 3:00 in the morning and things like that, so that they're getting woken up by pings in the middle of the night. He's just the worst person in the world. Everybody hates him.
To come back to the comparison with Al-Qaeda or ISIS, that idea where you have your ringleader types that are, the head honchos in terms of recruitment, but then you just get the idiots that buy into all the propaganda, and on the cases of ISIS then find themselves flying out to a location in the Middle East, and as soon as they get there they realise, oh shit, this isn't what I thought it was. The morally wrong thing, even though it's tempting, is to say, you're a fucking idiot, tough shit, you made a bad choice. But actually, as a compassionate human race, we should probably try and help. And I do think that the QAnon thing, the Trump radicalisation, and really just white extremism in the States, maybe America needs to start thinking along those lines and saying that the way to handle this to prevent it might not just be to toss them all into jail. But I don't know what the process is. I think it's probably twofold. One, to address it more as a mental health issue, but secondly, to definitely investigate the police thoroughly, all the police forces in America, and highlight the fact that, yes, you have been infiltrated. Obviously, on the back of 9/11, radicalisation with Islam went through the roof, and it did take individual mosques having to literally battle back on that and fight it. And I think that's the same thing you're going to have to see in local police departments being heightenedly aware of this is now a problem and we need to deal with it.
Let's talk about the inauguration. I was genuinely worried that something, like Harrison Ford movie worthy was gonna happen. I was watching it the whole time thinking, please don't let anything terrible happen. Please don't let anything terrible happen. Please don't let anything terrible happen. And I was so worried, and it was a huge relief. Let them have their moment, because they need to tell themselves a good story to give themselves something to aim at. And that's really important. The myths that you tell yourself about yourself matter.
But I tuning into it really felt this was not going to be a somber occasion, but it would have been a bit more reflective. And especially when you're wheeling out effectively the administrations that created the exact environment that led to Trump, and to not have it feel a bit, we need to learn some lessons from this and move forward. So you don't want to draw the comparison between, Nazi Germany post-World War II in this lot, but in the way that the Germans probably wouldn't have had a big yay, it's over type thing with celebrity singers. There would maybe have been a bit more sensitivity to the, we really did fuck this up royally here, and actually a lot of people on the stage right now kind of the reason for that. But then maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Tucker, you're correct here, that actually it's important that they tell themselves, hey, it's all going to be fine now, don't you worry, because they need to hear that at the moment. So I've got mixed feelings on it, to say the least.
To be fair, you've got to see this through American eyes. That was pretty sedate and somber compared to a normal American event.
Good point, well presented. Yes, I have no comeback to that. Yes, of course, by American standards, actually, Lady Gaga just sat and played the piano, which, contrasting with, say, a Super Bowl halftime show, that is the variety of somber, I suppose.
If you've seen the film or read the book, The Help, there is a lovely scene where the maid, she's got a racist boss, and she's taking care of the little girl, and she's trying to plant the seed in her head of the person that she should be. And she's saying to her, you are good and you are kind. And I often think this about Scotland. Scotland's a bit to the left of England, but it's not that much in terms of general attitudes. But we believe ourselves to be very different. And that actually matters in terms of who we elect and where we're going and the vision that Scotland has of itself. The myths that you tell yourselves about yourself matter because they become your guiding star. And therefore, it was really important for them, I think, to have a moment that they could say, right, we are going to be a nation that can be proud of itself again. And I just think, you know what, let them have it. Let them have Lady Gaga. They can have Lady Gaga. That's all right.
I did see a tweet, and I can't remember who put it out, but I think it was on the day of the Capitol thing, and it was somebody saying, in response to loads of people tweeting out saying, this is not America, this isn't America. Well, if we have to keep saying that every 3 weeks because some mad shit's gone down, maybe this is America. And I think that I'm agreeing with what you're saying, Tucker, but it's how far do you push that before you're just in total denial about the reality of the situation? And that was more when I watched it live, my feeling of the tone of this feels more we're denying how we got here, and we're not going to learn the lessons from it. We're just going to pat ourselves in the back and pretend that shit never happened. That's my worry, that instead of actually taking on board how dangerous and bad this really got, we're just going to move on now and revert back to the exact circumstances that led to it in the first place. And that's my concern moving forward, that they're not going to do enough to prevent a Trump happening again. And in our defence, we did say that on a previous episode. That was all three of us, the worry that unless you see change, this is going to come back round.
So firstly, I think that Biden's speech did address all of those things, and he was directly addressing incivility and the polarization. And I think that he is actually a good person to be leading America in this moment because he gets that, and it's not his inclination. He's not actually especially partisan himself. Secondly, I think that the insurrection on January the 6th has been a wake-up call for a lot of fence sitters, to be honest with you. And I think the more information that comes out about it, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And I think it provides a window of opportunity to move the window. So I'm actually probably more confident now that America has a chance to really turn its face against this than I was a month ago. Before any of it happened, I was much more concerned that Biden was going to slog through 4 years without the Senate, getting nothing done, with everybody just complaining that Democrats can't get anything done when it's still Republicans making sure that nothing can happen. They've got the Senate only by a whisker, but they've got it. They have the opportunity to actually make some fundamental change, and they probably have some political will to do it because of what's happened. So fingers crossed for them.
I would actually agree with everything you said about Joe Biden's speech. I think it was just the initial Disneyland parade of war criminals that were on the lead up to that made me feel like, wait a minute, these guys are the problem. This is why we ended up like this. But I think you're completely correct, actually. When I listened to the speech, I sort of simmered down a wee bit and was like, actually, what he's saying here is pretty on the money, as long as he delivers on it.
So here's a good example of just how far through the looking glass we've gone. There was a letter signed by previous heads of the military. Forgive me, in this moment, I cannot actually remember the specific title, but there's 10 of them still alive. They all signed it, basically trying to indicate to everybody, look, Trump's trying to do a military coup and everybody needs to make sure that this doesn't happen. And it was Dick Cheney that got that together and organised it. So we're in a situation where Dick Cheney was defending American democracy from somebody trying to take too much power into the executive. And, you know, you have one of those moments where you go, fucking hell. Do you know what I mean? It's like Nixon running an anti-corruption campaign. Either Dick Cheney's had a come to fucking Jesus moment about what he did, or more likely it was just so bad even Dick Cheney's going, fuck, this is really dangerous. And, you know, wow.
I think actually a lot of them from that era, and if you look across in the UK with Tony Blair, I think a lot of the stuff about him popping up to discuss Brexit a lot is him reacting possibly on some weird subconscious level, maybe realising I kind of laid the foundation for this because I was the one that lied and I broke trust in the establishment. I'm the reason why your Tommy Robinsons could play into the whole poppy British Armed Forces thing and the military aspect of that. I've created this environment, and you wonder with Dick Cheney and even George W. Bush as well, if they are now reflecting back thinking, fuck, actually we were one of the major stepping stones to get to Trump. I just wish they would all be a bit more honest about that. And that's to say, to come back to my Disneyland parade of war criminals coming out in that inauguration, just thinking, I don't know if this is your day. Like, I really don't think we need to see you right now, because all of them are in a lot of ways responsible for eventually getting to Trump.
If Trump's done something good, it's been to make people not necessarily be as subservient and unquestioning about people in political power as maybe they were in the past. So I guess some of these guys feel that as a bit of a threat, that, you know, they will be questioned on the things that they've done with, and not just be considered, well, that great guy who had that great role in the past. It's not necessarily a bad thing that he's made the president a more questioned role.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we touched on in one of the previous Trump episodes, that there's a weirdly positive aspects of him, is that he's highlighted so much of what is wrong with America in such an extreme and ham-fisted, on-the-nose way that, Tucker, as you're saying now, it's got to the point where we can't deny any of this anymore. It's now so up front and centre, action's got to be taken. But it's just that concern that if they don't make those changes, we could roll round to a Trump-like figure again. And as we've said in the past, our worry is that you're going to see someone come in that is more competent and capable than Trump. And that's what they need to be really vigilant about, is the potential for somebody somewhere between Mike Pence and Trump that might be able to come in and just do the same playbook in a slightly more coherent and competent way. And then you're in real trouble, but hopefully it won't come to that, and this is the end of it, fingers crossed.
I think Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz need to be expelled from the Senate for essentially being a part of this. I mean, there are laws on the statute books in America from Civil War times, essentially saying that if you take part in an insurrection against the US government, you can't sit as an elected representative. It's pretty cut and dried. So there's a good argument for actually saying, right, you two, you fucking lost your privileges, off you fuck.
Do we think this is the last we're going to hear of Trump and his group for a while, or do you think this is going to be ongoing over the weeks and months ahead?
So firstly, they're going to have the Senate impeachment trial in the second week of February. So we're going to hear more about it then. If they can carry the impeachment vote in the Senate, they can then take a simple majority vote on him never being allowed to hold office again. And at that point, I think that can be the end of him, because if he can't stand for anything, he can't campaign. And that really cuts the legs off his ability to raise money, because that's what he's doing. This is now his grift. The Stop the Steal was just purely a money-making exercise to begin with. I think he ended up believing it. But he will campaign just to earn money, just like Newt Gingrich and people like that have done, and just like Ron Paul does and things. You know, it's just a money-making exercise. But if he can't stand for office, he can't campaign. And if he can't campaign, he can't have any campaign finance schemes. He can't raise money. And then it really can be the end of him. But there's going to be other investigations. There's going to be state investigations, tax investigations, several lawsuits against him. So he's going to keep being in the news. But now he hasn't got Twitter or Facebook or any of these means to directly express himself. What we do hear of him is going to have to be filtered through an editorial process, which means that we're only going to hear about all the terrible things that are happening to him, and we won't get to hear him talking rubbish. I'm actually really, really looking forward to it, but we haven't heard the last of him. We're going to hear about him, not from him.
Yeah, I definitely think him losing his Twitter account will be more painful to him than any impeachment or any other investigation. Although maybe if they get him on tax, do this in America where someone's like the worst, like murderer ever, and they get them on some small tax violation and put them in jail for like a life sentence. So maybe they'll end up doing that with him too. Jumping back to the coronation, the inauguration. It's a little Freudian slip there. I thought the best part of that was the teenage poet, Amanda Gorman. Everyone enjoyed that. It's kind of funny that like young women can just get up and totally outstage like absolutely everyone there, like all these presidents and vice presidents and all these superstars and all that, and she just totally outshone all of them. That was brilliant. It makes you think America's such a massive country and they end up with politicians like that when they get such great skillful people kicking about.
She was absolutely spectacular, and the poem is wonderful. It was, yeah. I'm actually welling up a little bit just thinking about some of the lines where it was just absolutely spectacular. She's quite a talent.
When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth In this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it in its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.